Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Lorraine Regan, the founder and president of the Ireland Canada Centre for Commerce in Calgary. We would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples of the Treaty 6 region and the Métis settlements and Métis Nation of Alberta, regions 2, 3, and 4. We respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our community. The Ireland Canada Centre for Commerce Calgary was founded in 2010 and works to strengthen relationships between Canadian and Irish businesses, opening up opportunities for bilateral trade across multiple sectors. We have an important announcement regarding the organization at the end of this session today, so we hope you'll stay so you can have a listen and be the first to hear. We have almost 300 registrations to today's event and are very much looking forward to the discussion and the key takeaways. Moderated by Todd Hirsch, our amazing expert panel will have a candid conversation on positioning Alberta globally, concrete actions organizations can take, what opportunities are untapped, and what are the possible threats. A special thank you today to our technical sponsor, Calgary Economic Development. CED is a key partner in support of bilateral trade between Ireland and Canada. They are committed to supporting local companies enter new markets like Ireland through the Trade Accelerator Program, and they have a new cohort starting again in February. We have Thomas behind the scenes fully supporting the technical aspects of our event today, so a big thank you to you, Thomas. I'm delighted to welcome our first guest for some opening remarks today. Consul General of Ireland Frank Flood is Ireland's first Consul General of Ireland in Vancouver. The opening of a Consul General office in Vancouver is a recognition of the strong historical ties between Western Canada and Ireland. I attended the opening in September of this year, and the consulate is a beautiful space to welcome and share with Irish communities. Welcome, Consul General Flood.
Thank you, Lorraine, and it was a pleasure to have you in Vancouver, and always a pleasure to work with you. So thank you for your welcome. Unfortunately, Ambassador McKee is not in a position to join us today, but the Ambassador in Ottawa sends his very best regards to Lorraine and to all involved, the Ireland Canada Centre for Commerce in Alberta, for organising today's event. Over 300 members or around 300 participants. I was just asking Lorraine earlier if she was given free whiskey for people who participated in today's event, but I don't know if that happens. But I'd like to thank all of you for joining today in the interest of promoting stronger links, trade business links between Ireland and Canada. I suppose I only have actually one key message for you today, and that is that Ireland, post-Brexit, is very, very serious about doing business with Canada and doing business with Alberta, British Columbia, and Western Canada in general. Before Brexit, or since, I should say, since Brexit, before the pandemic came in on top of us, we had 20 Irish ministerial visits over a period of 24 months. Practically one Irish minister came to Canada every month to help promote trade business linkages and build on our cultural and our personal links between Ireland and Canada. As you know, Ireland and Canada have much in common. We're very similar culturally, and there's a huge amount of goodwill. But the challenge that we face in the world that we live in today is to work with key partners who we can rely on, who are culturally similar, and will help us in this very challenging geopolitical world that we live in today. So for Ireland, it's a bit of a no-brainer to work more closely, more seriously with Canada. When I came to Canada in September 2018, Ireland had 3 offices. The Irish government had 3 official offices in the whole of Canada. There was the Embassy in Ottawa, there was Tourism Ireland in Toronto, and Enterprise Ireland in Toronto. We were backed up by excellent honorary consuls such as Lorraine, but in general, full-time professional offices, all we had was three spaces all around Canada. When I finished my assignment next summer in August, we will have 7 offices in Canada. We'll have opened up the Consulate General in Vancouver. Enterprise Ireland opened up a new office in Montreal. Our investment people, our IDA, opened up an office in Toronto. And next summer, we will open up a Consulate General in Toronto. So we will go from 3 offices in Canada to 7 offices in Canada. And we are serious about doing business and promoting business. One thing I have learned in my time here in Vancouver is the Western Canada issue, in that when people, whether it happens with all my European colleagues, when people talk about doing business between EU and Canada, it tends to be Ontario focused. And the challenge is to promote Western Canada. And so I find this when I come to actually doing business and saying, I need a minister for Vancouver, that I will always say, we need a minister for Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver, and not just for Vancouver. So we need to build up a business case, one that makes sense, one that takes in the whole economic potential of Western Canada. And up to now, we've always relied on our great honorary consul network in Alberta, which is ably led by Lorraine on the trade side. So it is very, very welcome and very timely that today's initiative is being taken. Because when it comes to St. Patrick's Day next year, or any trade or any business events from now on, we'll be able to say, we have Alberta and we have BC and we have Northwest Territories and Yukon, and we have a real business case for bringing people over. I'll give you 2 examples. Film is huge in Vancouver. There's 60 films being shot on a daily basis in Vancouver. But it's very hard to get a film delegation to come to Vancouver on its own. But it'd be far easier to get one to come to Banff and to Vancouver, and then move on down to LA, where Ireland has also opened up a new consulate, particularly to work on the film side. And finally, I would say, it's to raise awareness of the potential for Ireland as an easy gateway into EU. Mark Anthony Brands, which produces Glendalough whiskey in Ireland, is a BC, Vancouver-based company, one that opened up in Ireland in 2015 and now employs over 150 people and is actually expanding and uses it as its easy entry point into the EU and into North America and the Middle East. One thing is for sure, and I'll finish with this, Ireland is a friend of Canada. We will always be there for you. We're politically stable. If you want to expand your business into Europe, Ireland is there for you to help you on your way and to help you grow. Canada has always been a great friend for Ireland. We have many Irish people coming and working here, and the welcome you give us is exceptional. It is much appreciated. And as I say at the very beginning, the goodwill is there. The challenge is now to help us use it in a business manner, especially in the world that we live in today. So I'd like to thank Lorraine and all concerned and wish you every success with your seminar today and in the future, and to reassure you of the embassies and the ambassadors' support in Ottawa and the consulates here in Vancouver. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you, Consul General Flood. That was wonderful. I appreciate those remarks. I agree, our ties are quite strong and we are looking forward to strengthening them even further. So I'm happy now to introduce our moderator for today's event, Mr. Todd Hirsch, VP and Chief Economist of ATB Financial. Many of us are very familiar with Todd as an active member of our communities throughout the province. He's also the author of 4 books. His latest, Spiders in COVID Space, Adapting During and After the Pandemic, was released in March 2021. He's also the host of a podcast titled The Future of, which just won a national award this year. Congratulations. He always brings a fresh perspective on the economics of the future of work through the power of storytelling, and he inspires the business community to look forward with a unique and positive perspective. Welcome, Todd Hirsch.
Well, thank you, Lorraine, for that very kind introduction. Lorraine forgot to mention what great pals that she and I are and have been over the years. And in fact, it was because of Lorraine that I had the wonderful opportunity to address the Ireland-Canada Centre for Commerce in Dublin. Was it 2017, Lorraine? having the opportunity to speak in Dublin at that
Yeah.
conference and talk about Western Canada, and that was a real honor for me. So thank you, Lorraine, for inviting me to be part of this. I'm especially pleased to be here this morning because I don't have to do all the talking. Almost always when I'm on a webinar, I'm the one doing the presentation, but this time I get to play role of moderator and listen to other even smarter people talk about Alberta's economy. And before I introduce and we get to the panelists, I want to say, as an Albertan, I was born and raised in Edmonton, but have lived the last half of my life now in Calgary, having accidentally moved to Calgary after I graduated from university. But I feel honored. I consider both Edmonton and Calgary and many other places in the province in between as my honorary hometown, and spend a good deal of time in both cities. I often joke that this year is actually looking pretty good. I cheer for the Oilers and pay municipal tax in Calgary. So that's where I split my allegiances. But wonderful to be here this afternoon. Now we have the dream panel. When Lorraine and I got together and we said, let's put together a panel for this. And who could we get? We got almost exactly our dream panel. Drake wasn't available. He sent his regrets, but other than Drake, we have exactly who we thought would make the very best people to talk about how do we position Alberta in the global economy in 2022 and going beyond. So what I'm going to do now is introduce each one of them. And as I introduce them, I'll invite them to give just a quick little 2-minute talk about if they want to say a bit more about the organization they work for, and maybe the organization's view of Alberta in the global economy. I'm not going to read their whole bio because that was sent out as part of the registration and online if you want to go and read more about them. So to save time, I'm just going to introduce them and give their title and then hand it over to them. And then we're going to spend a lot of time getting into the Q&A. So let's start first of all with Lynette. Lynette Trombley, Vice President, Corporate Affairs of Invest Alberta Corporation. Over to you, Lynette, for 2 minutes.
Thanks, Todd. So Invest Alberta Corporation, for those who aren't familiar with us, was really only created about a year ago, 2020. And we were created by the government of Alberta to focus on attracting impactful investment to Alberta that will create jobs for Albertans and a future-focused, resilient economy for Alberta. Now, you might think to yourself, creating an investment attraction agency in the middle of a global pandemic, that's a tall order. It has been quite the year for us. We do also have these international offices. We have several offices across the world that help Alberta companies expand their position abroad, but also help companies in those markets explore investments into Alberta. So essentially what we do is, between our Alberta team and our international team, we work to provide tailored support to companies, investors, and entrepreneurs and major new projects. And we break down barriers so that investors and businesses can establish, grow, and succeed without limits in Alberta and across the world.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lynette. Let's go next to my fellow Calgarian, Terry Rock, who is joining us this afternoon from Edmonton.
Yeah, is it a giveaway here on the back?
Whatever. Terry Rock, President and CEO of Platform Calgary. Take it away, Terry.
Thanks, Todd. So I'm joining us today from Edmonton because we just announced the Alberta Pre-Accelerator Program with the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation and our partners at Innovate Edmonton, which is really designed to create 180 spots for early stage founders from anywhere in the province to be accelerated through their journey with our programs. So Platform Calgary is part of this innovation ecosystem in Alberta. We're laser focused on making Calgary, and in this sense, as a member of Team Alberta, a global hub for startups and innovation. We think it's pretty clear that an inclusive tech-led approach to economic growth and diversification will unlock the new avenues of prosperity for today and long into the future. Calgary is actually already one of the top 100 emerging innovation ecosystems around the world. And we have big goals. We want over the next 10 years to see a 10x increase in the rate of startup creation and growth to lead to tens of thousands of new future-proof jobs and ultimately a tripling of the size of the tech sector in our city. So to do that, we're opening the Platform Innovation Center. This is 50,000 square feet. We're calling it Calgary's Home for Innovators, right in downtown Calgary, across from our amazing, globally award-winning new public library. We've got 60 partners that are there to, when you walk through the door, you get access to the full innovation ecosystem of Calgary under one roof. So collectively, we're what our name suggests. We're a platform on which to build with an expansive, efficient, and well-resourced network of support at its foundation. So when you walk in that door as an innovator, everything you need to get started and get growing is there. Education programming, community advice, and a globally connected network of resources all under one roof. It's Innovation Week in Calgary, Todd, and it's too bad that I had to come up here to do that announcement. But tomorrow morning we have our founder showcase. It's just about 25 companies that have been through our programs in the past quarter, and just showcasing these folks that are now raising money, creating new jobs, and really participating, bringing our province into the global conversation.
And I have to add, Terry, you've got one of the most interesting and exciting new architectural pieces in Calgary's East Village.
Yeah. I mean, it's a parking structure, but it's future-proof so that when we don't maybe have some advances in mobility that we don't need parking anymore, we'll turn that into more commercial or residential space over time. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Terry. Next, over to Malcolm Bruce, the Chief Executive Officer of Edmonton Global. Malcolm.
Thanks very much. Edmonton Global is a collaboration of 14 member municipalities that in 2018 recognized that competing locally was not good enough, and we needed to figure out a way to compete globally. And so we were established to help drive both foreign direct investment to the region, but also to help companies into the market export space. And I will say to you that since 2019, that sort of rate of growth has been in the neighborhood of 15 final investment decisions for this region at the tune of about $1.7 billion. And that's just Edmonton Global having some touch points with it. The region itself, just in 2021, have had announceables of up to $18 billion of net new investment coming into this region. And much like Calgary, I think there are certain things that are showing the emergence of a diversified economy when the CBRE turn around and act and note that Edmonton is the fastest growing tech sector in North America and is now ranked in the 38th position, which is great news for Edmonton and Alberta. And the only other thing I would highlight to everybody on the call is Alberta as a whole is incredibly important to Canada's future. Calgary is the 4th largest economy in Canada. The Edmonton metropolitan region is the 5th largest economy in Canada. And when you look at foreign direct investment, 85% of all foreign direct investment that comes into this country come to the top 12 economies. So when you're ranked number 4 and number 5, these two economic engines for the province are very, very important, not just for Alberta, but also for the country. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us this morning, Malcolm. And last but certainly not least is my pal and my boss's boss, I have to mention, Joan Hurts. Now, Joan wears a lot of hats. She's the chair of ATB Financial, chair of the board of ATB Financial, but she's also the chair of Edmonton International Airport. And I think it's more in that capacity she's joining us this afternoon to talk about how Edmonton International Airport is positioning Edmonton and Alberta globally. Joan, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, and I am watching you carefully. And by the way, Malcolm, while 4th might be Calgary, 5th is Edmonton, we'll talk at the end of the hockey season. So the airport and ATB are really aligned in the sense that they're both organizations set up for economic growth. How can we be a catalyst for Alberta to grow economically? So fun facts, I guess, ATB Financial, 55 billion in assets, and about 5,000 team members, 800,000 clients. But what I was thinking about was what's happening right now in Alberta is, of course, the impacts of COVID and Alberta's economy attempting to recover. And I would share that ATB so far has administered 43% of all of the HASCAP loans. So that's $170 million in highly affected sectors credit availability, which is huge, which is also technologically enabled, which will be another theme that we'll be talking about a lot today. The airport, of course, a catalyst for economic development is our air service. So we call it air pipelines, actually, and that includes the growth of passenger traffic, but also international cargo services. So our focus at the airport, our whole strategic approach is how can we help support innovation expansion? How can we act as an incubator, knowing that Alberta is tagged to innovation, so is the airport, but how do we build this transmodal future for accessing markets, especially Ireland, right? Frank, I'm hitting the right note here. How can we tap into the international markets to help benefit Alberta? So more on that to come. And fun fact about the airport that I was going to share is that in 2019, we had 55 direct destinations. And now as we build back, we're at about 45. So it's coming. I know everyone's impatient, but stay tuned and we have great optimism.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joan. So let's jump right into the questions. And I want to, by the way, let everyone on the call know we are going to save some time toward the end of the presentation for questions and answers. So I'll make sure we leave at least 10 or 15 minutes because I know you're going to have some questions for our panelists. So, but let's dive in right away with the questions. And I'm going to start first of all with Lynette. And really broad strokes here, Lynette, what does Alberta need to get right in terms of positioning ourselves globally? What are some really high level thoughts you might have on that?
I sort of think about it in three tenets with a little extra one. So I've got cost of doing business, ease of doing business, and speed of doing business, plus ESG. So it doesn't fit neatly into any one of those categories. And it is a huge consideration for companies, but also for jurisdictions, because that's the lens through which companies look at and evaluate jurisdictions. So, I mean, cost of doing business is really thinking about the whole piece and how do we make it cost effective for companies to do business. There are lots of other considerations now for companies, and we talk a lot about quality of life, but at the end of the day, this is a business decision and we can't lose sight of that this is about a bottom line and a balance sheet. And then ease of doing business, this really comes down to red tape, regulatory, and also organizations like Edmonton Global and Invest Alberta and Platform Calgary is how do we create this seamless way of doing business for investors, and what roads can we pave for them? How can we break down barriers before they happen? And how do we essentially just make it easy to land here? And I'd say Alberta is doing really well with all of these pieces and speed of doing business as well. So it's thinking about how do we make it as easy as possible for investors to land here? And, you know, I think a shout out to Ireland in terms of a jurisdiction that Alberta can look to learn a lot from. There's a reason that investment is landing in Ireland, and it's because they're addressing all of these aspects. And then that third one, which is ESG, everybody is talking about. But I would say that so much focus of the ESG is put on the E part of it, the climate targets and the environmental policies, and that is an incredibly important aspect. But we sometimes lose sight of the S part of ESG. And that's an aspect I think that we need to really focus on as a jurisdiction in order to be really attractive for these companies who are making these decisions. This is becoming a huge focus for companies in their decision-making process. So our Indigenous engagement, and also not just the duty to consult, but on top of that, the partnerships that we create with Indigenous communities. So I shouldn't use acronyms. Sorry, it's a hazard of Edmonton of economic development. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, and that's essentially the criteria that companies are looking at jurisdictions when they decide where to locate. So environmental, they think about what environmental policies does that jurisdiction have? Do they have access to zero emissions electricity, for example? And what are the climate targets of that jurisdiction? And social part would be what are our relationships with our Indigenous communities, in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And then the governance part of things is how do we make decisions on the G side of ESG? One thing I think for a note to all governments is when you're building new policies and legislation, what are you doing to consult industry? What are you doing to consult and think about not just existing business, but how is this going to impact new entrants? And how are you engaging the business community in your decision-making process? Is it transparent? So these are some of the things that companies look at when they're trying to enter a jurisdiction. And also stability. They look at when we're making policies, is there going to be a risk that a program that they're subscribing to or a tax policy that they're coming here for is not going to exist in a couple of years? So something for our governments to think about as well. And how well do they collaborate across those three levels of government? Are they going to get in between a war between a municipal government and a federal government or any kind of other dispute there? These are all considerations. So it's become really complex, I guess, for investors. And I would just say as a jurisdiction, we need to look at how do we make it easy and how do we make it effective for them to locate here? And how does their brand tie with our brand? Because brand has become such a big part of a company's valuation now.
Other panelists, you want to jump in on that? What do we need to get right to position ourselves?
Todd, I'm happy to jump in if that's okay. So I think there's two things that I just want to talk about. The first one is ambition. And I think one of the things that we tend to lack, both from an individual company perspective, but also from an understanding from a sectorial supply chains perspective. So if you look at agriculture as a great example, Western Canada, the three Western provinces have 78 million acres of arable land. That's more than France and Germany combined. And yet our economic output in terms of value add to farm sales is 1-to-1. If you look at the Netherlands, who have a grand total of 4.4 million acres under agriculture, their outputs are over $150 billion or more than 30-to-1 value add to every dollar of farm sales. And so we're 1-to-1. The Netherlands are 30-to-1. And so the question is how can we not scale to get to 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 in the agriculture sector? And you think about ag tech, food tech, all the great things that are going on, but we need ambition. And then the second thing I think that's important for Alberta is up until about 2014, many companies, not all, but many companies were very comfortable about competing locally and making a very good profit margin on competing locally. The world has changed. And I think from a cultural perspective, we need to understand there is lots of opportunity in the global marketplace for our companies, particularly our technologies, to compete in. And you see it every single day. So I just think that, from us, we just need to think a little bit bigger and a little bit more ambitiously, because I think the opportunities are there globally and people want our products. And that's an important factor. Thanks.
Joan, I want to ask you the next question. Is there anything we need to stop doing in Alberta or maybe to change?
Well, I would build a bit on where Malcolm was going. I think the whole mojo thing, I think Alberta has so much to offer the world, and we used to really believe that. And I feel like there's a little bit of wobbling in that sort of confidence and that maverick attitude. And I think you can feel it coming back, and then there's kind of an apology. So I think some of the things we need to do are, let's take on ESG. Let's be overt and say, we believe that through industry and government collaboration, we can produce a net zero barrel of oil. Just, those kinds of things that are being said out loud by the Pathways Project. You've got oil sands companies coming together and putting that stake in the sand, but saying that it needs to be a collaboration with government. These are the kinds of things that I think the rest of the world is looking to see what are you actually doing, and do you have the confidence behind it? Is your industry with you? Is government with you? As Lynette saying, do you have that certainty of regulatory as well? So I think that's one of the things is confidence. And the second one is, to me, quality of life, and really standing up Alberta as saying, this is a great place to live and work, and let's make sure it stays that way. So that is everything. That is how we welcome people, how we increase our talent. And so I'm also on the board of AMI, the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. So as we elevate the talent and we create this virtuous circle with industry where people are being trained and we're attracting incredible researchers and we're solving problems for industry, and you have this ecosystem being created where we attract the best talent, the best researchers, industry will come. I mean, Google DeepMind came here. They came here for that kind of a, not only the quality of life that we could offer, but also that virtuous circle of what is here for our industries to continue to grow and innovate.
And following up on that a little bit, and I'll pose this next question to Terry, but I think it follows out of what Joan was just speaking about. Do we have a reputational or maybe a branding issue in Alberta? Because I've heard people suggest that we have. Terry, what do you think about that?
Leading question, Todd. I think that, put it this way, I think it matters a lot how people view us, because to sum up sort of all of this, where this has been, I think the get right, the stop doing, and then the reputation side, we have to think about, this is actually, we should be building our strategies around people. Because if you built an innovation ecosystem, for example, where my head is every day, around the innovator, so what do they need to survive? Because Google's coming to Alberta because of the talent. They know it's going to be easier to do that. And what we're seeing is the big shift is that companies can set up and they can scale globally, they can scale their team globally, and you can be in the same room and making $100,000 more a year. And we're seeing this happen to some of our tech companies. So we are, even in a virtual world, competing globally. What we need is for those innovators to feel like they're part of a local scene that is doing things that matter and that they're welcome into it. So I go to big opportunities like ESG, like clean tech broadly, like ag tech. These are like, we're keeping the world warm and moving, and its sustainable energy challenges that it has is a core part of what Alberta has to offer. And we have the talent that is working on it. They're working on it one way now. They're going to be working on it different ways in the future. Same with ag, feed the world through Alberta. These are big, exciting challenges that they don't have the kind of, when I think about Silicon Valley and some of the startups that come out of there, they are more about the hype than they are about what's actually getting done. I think here, like, this is a place where we are actually tackling some of the most interesting, globally relevant problems, and we have the talent to do it. And so then you have, not only do you have the talent, but then you have investors who are sophisticated in investing in ag. You have investors that are sophisticated in investing in oil and gas. That's all part of the ecosystem that we need to have here. So, imagine, like, we are the place in the world that's tackling some of the world's most interesting problems and most long-term important problems. That should be our reputation.
So I want to shift gears now a little bit. So we've talked about how do we position Alberta, some of the things we need to get right, maybe things we need to stop doing. But let's turn to concrete actions. And here I'm going to ask each of you, and you'll have to be brief, I know, because you could probably go on for an hour talking about what your organization is doing, what you're most focused on in terms of positioning Alberta. But let's start with Malcolm. Give us a 60-second, like, if you could highlight one focus area of Edmonton Global, how you're positioning the city and the province globally.
So first of all, whenever I'm in market, I'm marketing Canada first, and then I market the province, and then I market my region, because globally, Canada is the name brand that we're trying to get across the finish line. And so as far as I'm concerned, if we can get an investment into Canada, we've won. Now, if they come to the Edmonton metropolitan region, I've really won. But there are two things that every investor talks about, which I think have been highlighted in our previous conversation that we emphasize. Is one is talent. We've got 7 post-secondaries in this region. They produce 20 to 30,000 graduates every year, and there's 130,000 in the pipeline in any given year. And the other one is innovation. Those are the top 2 questions from any company we're looking at, because they want to see their future here and can they grow and prosper here. And those are 2 key components. Thanks.
Lynette, is there a key area of focus for Invest Alberta that you'd highlight?
Well, our challenge is we focus on multiple sectors. So, really making it targeted to each sector and what Alberta's advantages are. I think I go back to what I said at the beginning in describing Alberta's advantages as cost of doing business, ease of doing business, and speed of doing business. But above that, I think, and it's to tie this into your previous comment, and the topic, Todd, is catching Alberta's brand up with Alberta's reality, plus incorporating in a bit of the aspirational brand. So, we're traditionally known as a very traditional oil and gas based province, but that reality has shifted. It's just our brand hasn't shifted along with it. So I would say positioning Alberta right now more as a net zero energy hub, and a global leader in things like hydrogen, clean tech, life sciences, and agriculture, plant-based agriculture and food. So really looking at that future-focused brand, but also incorporating a lot of the strengths that we have right now. And branding is really important at this point in time, in addition to that targeted, tailored, investor-focused services that we provide.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that brand is coming up in the conversation, maybe with Invest Alberta particularly, because it gets back to the conversation that we were just having. So I'm glad to hear that that is one of the focus areas. Let's skip back to Terry. Terry, 60 seconds, what is Platform Calgary's one focus that you could talk about how you're positioning the province?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm going to one focus, but maybe 2 quick angles. So the first thing is we're trying to pull the innovation ecosystem together under one roof to make it go faster and for people to be able to scale bigger and to surround innovators with what they need. And so we've got 60 partners. We are all in with innovator at the core. And so that's, it sounds kind of grand and hard to sort of amorphous, but the reality is when I talk to those founders of the companies or people that are working with the tech, to just make it easy for them is going to make a big difference. One of the things that we do globally, though, is we actually operate the startup visa program, and it's the same thing that where if a founder of a tech company anywhere in the world wants to set up in Alberta at that earliest stage, we run them through some programming. And just in this 2 weeks, we're landing 6 new startups in Calgary that have come into us through the startup visa program. I think that's an underappreciated sort of weapon in our, maybe weapon's the wrong word, tool in our toolkit to position Alberta. And then the government of Alberta took a sub part of that and built something called the Foreign Graduate Student Startup Visa. And so that is really taking the talent that has already committed themselves to going to school outside of their home country and saying, if you want to build a company, then Alberta welcomes you. This is pretty interesting. We're the only place really doing it in that focus, and we're a partner with that program as well.
Joan, is there an area of focus you want to highlight from either
airport? Yeah, I think what I would say is for years, we have referred to Edmonton region and our airport as the gateway of the North. And we're very proud of those connections that we provide to Northern Canada. But I think as the region starts to grow in a global sense, that title is evolving. And in fact, we're well on our way to positioning our airport, our region, and the province of Alberta as North America's gateway to Asia. And Edmonton is closer to most major Asian markets than nearly any other city in North America via our circumpolar air routes. And I think through the pandemic this past year, we've seen this spike in e-commerce activity and shipments, but this global trend was already happening before that. And if you take EIA's, the airport's cargo advantage, combined with our quicker access to Prince Rupert, the port, Of course, we have issues now with flooding, et cetera, but it's a day and a half closer to Asia than other Western American ocean ports. And if you couple that with our multimodal rail yards that are here, the mix with the Canamex highway system, I think you start to see this global logistics competitive advantage for Canada and Alberta as the economy transforms.
Any of the other panelists want to, before we move on to opportunities and threats, talk about maybe what you would advocate in terms of maybe not your own organization, but maybe what governments at any level, what they should be doing? It's crickets.
Oh, I'm happy to take that one on because I bang this drum quite a bit. And I think what people need to understand, particularly governments, is rhetoric that occurs domestically impacts investor confidence globally. And I'll give you a great example. We did a webinar on hydrogen opportunities in Japan, and they're looking at scaling to 30 million tons of hydrogen by 2050. And then he listed off 3 things that need to be solved. And point number 2 was British Columbia and Alberta need to collaborate better together to get product to market. So this is the Japanese telling us that we need to get better together. And so it's because of the rhetoric that they're hearing in our domestic chatter is impacting investor confidence in a global stage. So I think, as I always try and tell people, we do work very well together. And on the hydrogen file, the federal government, the provincial government, and throughout our provincial entities, we're very well aligned, but it doesn't always resonate with investors, especially global investors. So I think that's an important aspect that I would say that we need to get better at.
Fantastic. Lynn, Joan, Terry, anything you'd want to add quickly about what you would advocate in concrete action for government?
If I can jump in, I mean, like we've talked about ESG, and I think one of the interesting challenges we have is that we know that our economy is transitioning, and we know that the energy mix is transitioning, and all these things. And I go back to my talent comment, is like, where's the talent that's going to drive that transformation coming from? And it's an easier switch for the talent that's currently engaged in the energy sector to switch, to move into building out the more cleaner sources of energy, cleaning up the process, et cetera, moving to net zero along the way. And so I think that's a double down opportunity. Like we can be a top 5 region in the world in that, and it's going to start with investing in the talent that does it. So right now we're trying to get talent to come out of oil and gas into tech, and that's a harder transition than move from one way of producing energy to another way, and or improving the process. And so that feels like a double, triple, quadruple down kind of place for us to go as a province.
I would just go ahead, Lynette.
I would just add that I think it kind of echoes Malcolm's point a little bit in terms of we often think we look inward. My comment, I guess, would be to all levels of government is to look at, never lose sight of who our competitors are and what they're doing. And the business world and even the market dynamics shift really fast. And if we don't keep up, we're going to just be left out. Nobody's going to wait around for us to catch up or to figure it out. So looking at who are we competing against, what are they doing? And then the other thing I would say is scale. We tend to dip our toe in the water of certain programs, incentives, subsidies, whatever you want to call them. They're a market reality when it comes to investment attraction. Investment is going to choose wherever the deal is best for them, wherever they're going to be able to run their business the most efficiently. And so when we're putting out these programs, think about the scale at which they matter to the investors. So sometimes different levels of government will either not put something out, which will make us uncompetitive, or put something out at such a small scale that it's not competitive and it doesn't move the needle, or the requirements of the program will be so cumbersome that it's a deterrent for investors. So really thinking hard about our competitiveness, but our competitiveness compared to our global competitors is just something that I would echo for all levels of government.
Joan, last word on this section before we move on to opportunities and threats.
I think the government needs to support us in building on our competitive advantage. And to me, that's support of infrastructure. So support of the infrastructure so we can build this intermodal trade and huge transformation of our gateway. The second thing would be infrastructure that includes helping with emissions reduction. So the carbon sequestration investment tax credit, great investment in how do we partner where industry says this is a good way to reduce emissions. And then I think thinking of our people and our talent and things like AI also as infrastructure and investing in that, because that all forms this ecosystem that will drive the advancement and the recovery of the economy.
All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left before we should move to some Q&A. We're at 1:45. And I want to spend the rest of the time with the panel talking about opportunities and threats. And I'm going to leave this one open to whoever wants to jump in first. Is there an untapped industry in Alberta that perhaps we've overlooked and could help position us globally? Or is it a matter of doubling down on the things that we're already really good at? Who wants to tackle that one?
I could jump in on that one. I think in some cases our opportunities are also our threats. So I would say the first one I would just throw there is hydrogen. We hear a lot about hydrogen, and rightfully so. This is really getting in now, positions, whichever jurisdiction gets in now, to be able to supply the world with their future energy needs. So Malcolm brought up Japan. Japan is looking to onboard 30 million tons by 2050. That's an amazing amount compared to what's produced now globally. Alberta is really well positioned for that. And then we also have this extra geological advantage of being able to be a carbon sequestration jurisdiction as well. So that enables us to be that, as I said, net zero energy hub of future energy. So that is our huge opportunity. It's also a potential threat in the sense of regulatory, the unknown of creating a new industry. It's been a long time since we've done this, and being able to get ahead of things. So this is going to require a lot of coordination across industry, government, academia, and really everyone to be able to make this work. And it's our huge opportunity. I would say, again, another opportunity and threat would be talent. So talent is right now one of our biggest value propositions. But as we start to attract some of these major companies, we don't necessarily have that ongoing talent production at the scale that we need. So what are we doing to get ahead of that? What is our talent strategy as a jurisdiction to make sure that that remains one of our competitive advantages? And it's something that we need to be able to bring in quickly to be able to support some of these large projects. The Amazon announcement, for example, made in Calgary about a week ago. So that's about 1,000 workers over the next little while. Some of these major hydrogen projects, those are thousands and thousands of workers. How are we going to plan ahead to support these projects? And then I would also say another one of the threats is protectionism, both home and abroad. So the US protectionism is going to be a concern for us going forward because we rely heavily on that as a manufacturing partner and link. We're a midstream manufacturer, and so we rely on inputs imported to manufacture projects that we then export for further finishing. So if there's protectionism going on, that limits our ability to do that, those supply chain routes as well. And then also sometimes I hear from some of the business community, some concern about new projects being brought in. And we just need to make sure that we're working with our business community to ensure that they have the right supports, but also that they understand that bringing new projects in, foreign direct investment, that's a value add, not a detractor to the ecosystem. So that's my quick and dirty opportunities and threats.
Who else wants to jump in, either talking about opportunities, areas maybe we've overlooked, or doubling down, or we can get into the threats too. Malcolm, Terry, Joan?
Happy to start. I think, from my perspective, there are two things that we're very good at this province and that we can scale to meet global needs. One is in the agriculture sector, which I've talked about, and the other one is the energy sector. All those enabling things like emerging technologies and stuff like health AI and and innovation and green tech and clean tech, all are going to enable traditional sectors to get better, but also create new sectors. But I think when you talk about global scaling, that we can do this, that really sort of capitalizes on core strengths that we have in Western Canada, that I think are tremendous opportunities for us if we get it right. I think that's really the key for me.
Terry or Joan?
Go ahead, Terry.
Sure. Well, I mean, I can go. I mean, I think that's also important to look at the long tail of opportunities. So tomorrow morning, you could tune in to our founder showcase and see 7 music tech startups that are the result of a partnership with the National Music Center and the Embassy of France, who said, we want to promote our creatives. And they came to us and we created this partnership that's now in its 2nd iteration, and looks like it's pretty interesting. And I think that there's some surprising strength in the creative industries when it comes to one of the areas that we could build out on and kind of flesh out the edges of the entire of the system. The other one I just want to bring up is fintech. So a couple of weeks ago, we announced our intent to work with Digital Commerce Bank in Calgary to put together $1 million annual fintech prize, which is designed to help scaling fintechs that have that agree to be a part of the Calgary innovation ecosystem. And it's 3 prizes of cash prizes, non-dilutive, straight into the companies, $500K, $250, and $250. And there's something about the fact that we're a head office city. We've got a lot of really interesting technology that's addressing, I'm thinking of it as transactions, back office, that kind of thing. We just celebrated 2 startups yesterday that are kind of doing internal audit tech, which is, not the sexiest thing, but it's saving hundreds of millions of dollars in business process. So these are areas that we can focus on strengths, and we should focus on strengths and make sure we get those right. But it can come from anywhere. Global players like Benevity are like, you would never kind of proactively engineer the creation of a Benevity or a Cement or a Solium, which is some of our big companies, or Jobber in Edmonton. These are not the kind of things that we would sit in a conference room and say we should focus on that. They're going to come up, and we need to be prepared to support those innovators, those founders, when they raise their head, and then get all in on it when it makes sense.
I think, Todd, one of the things that Lynette maybe touched on is one of our biggest threats might be our biggest opportunity, which is the world is turning to work from anywhere. So if you're young or skilled talent can work from anywhere, is that a threat that we're going to lose that? Or is it an opportunity for us to gain that? And I think it's all how we approach, as we've been talking about in this conversation. So the work from anywhere thing is a huge opportunity for Alberta, I think, to create that ecosystem, that openness to people moving in and out of education, in and out of industry, learning from different industries, and then coming back to us. Thinking of every person that leaves your organization as an alumni, so that you welcome them back instead of, oh, you've left us. Those kinds of cultural shifts, I think we're going to have to be open to. And then the second big one that's threat and opportunity, I think, is how we are going to show up on climate risk. And any large emitter that doesn't take these concerns seriously, and the airport would be included in that. So, we were the first airport to sign on to the climate pledge and commit to being carbon neutral by 2040, and then showing up and showing what we're doing about that, right? Like having the world's largest solar farm and having a cogen facility and, working on biofuel development. I think these are the concrete things that will allow us, those are opportunities to show up in the world as a place to come where we are taking it seriously and we are completely involved in investing in this transformation.
I want to shift now.
Todd, could I jump in and I want to emphasize something that Joan said, because I think it really captures something important to me is
go ahead.
This work from anywhere world. Just think about, we know how amazing it is to have Alberta as our backyard, and we take it for granted. and then you add in our tax policies, and you add in other things around quality of life, I feel like people that spend time here get it, and it's a hard thing to convey. So I really want to focus on keeping the people. Like I think about all the people that are at U of A in artificial intelligence, even though they might be working for Amazon, we want them to be Albertans. And this is a really important thing, because they're going to go to startup TNT and they're going to put $5,000 into an angel pool and invest in a local startup. And then 3 years later, they're going to leave their job at Google and come and work for this cool startup in Edmonton. That is how the world's going to work. And we're just so well positioned as a province to play in that space, but we're going to have to be assertive and creative to do it.
And for good news, 60% of the AMY graduates were retained in 2020-21. So that we are on the right trajectory, but you're absolutely right, Terry. And think of it also as tourism. Like if we build an amazing backyard, guess who we will also attract? And there's an industry that we didn't touch on very much today, Todd, but the attraction of tourism dollars is huge for Alberta.
Well, I'm glad you both met, Terry, you and Joan both mentioned post-secondary, and it's a good segue into some of the questions that are coming in. And by the way, if you have more questions, type them into the Q&A section. Try to keep them really brief. If you keep them brief, it's more likely I'm going to read it. But if you have questions for the panelists, but one of the questions that have come in on the chat is about investments in post-secondary. We haven't really gotten into that too much. And this is a free-for-all question, whoever wants to jump in. How significant are our post-secondary institutions, and how should we be viewing investments in those?
Hugely significant.
Hugely significant. Yeah. Say more.
Well, I think Malcolm said it earlier. One of the first questions we get from any investor in any sector is talent. So what does your talent, your labor pool look like? What is the cost and the qualifications of your labor pool? How agile and mobile are they? And then, as I mentioned, if we're attracting these great large investments, what's our ability to continuously produce top talent to be able to sustain those? So it's a huge value add for us, but also it's one of those opportunity/threat pieces, because talent can be the attractor, but we have to be able to maintain that in order to keep companies. And the other thing I would add is our post-secondaries beyond talent, if we're just talking pure investments and value, is in industry partnerships. Now, I've heard the good, the bad, and the ugly from industry on post-secondary partnerships. We've got some really great success stories. We've also got some work to do in some of these cases on being able to be nimble, agile, and good partners with industry. But that is often, for some of these large companies and these multinationals, the first way to attract them. We can attract a researcher, we can attract a research lab, and then they have a footprint in Alberta. And then they start to expand from there. So if we think life sciences, that's really how we start to grow our life sciences sector, is by focusing in on that R&D partnership first. And then we start to get a foothold with these companies. And then we get the manufacturing and everything else that comes with it.
Any of the other three comments on post-secondary education or education more generally?
Yeah, I think Lynette is hitting it. I think getting that virtuous circle right, rather than talking about it in terms of pure dollars and cents and funding, having come through, I was the interim CEO of a post-secondary in Alberta when there were changes. But, I think if we just focus and say we are okay with having different kinds of educational badging, different kinds of experiences, then you get more of that virtuous circle of attracting industry to send their people to your post-secondary, and then those partnerships start to happen at that granular level. It doesn't have to be big and complicated. And again, it's that I think it's a cultural shift in our post-secondaries. It's a cultural shift for us in industry, and it's a cultural shift for us, saying to our kids, okay, go get your degree, get your second degree, go work for the rest of your life. No, not anymore. So how do we that might be a starting point for you, but all of us are going to be continuous learners. We're going to be micro-badging. We're going to be engaging with our post-secondaries in a completely different way. If you can work from anywhere, you can learn from anywhere. So our post-secondaries have to show up and say, how can we teach from anywhere? How can we engage from anywhere? So I think that's a transformation which is completely underway. Like, I have nothing but good things to say about the steps that they're taking towards that, but that's where we have to go.
I'm a big advocate in saying education really only begins when you walk across the stage at convocation. It's an important first step, but it gets to a question that has come in here. Within education and micro-credentials, are we supporting every Alberta resident, young and mature, to get education and nudging everyone to lifelong learning? Malcolm or Terry, do you want to, either one of you want to tackle that one?
Well, I think that's a cultural shift, right? I think, competency-based training, which the UK are moving to, BMW's moved to, the US are looking at it really importantly, is, so if you're doing, do you get accredited for doing? And that sort of helps to change the culture on lifelong learning. And I think, ultimately, like just from my own business perspective, I believe in it. So I invest in each one of my team members to get the opportunity to go and do professional development, personal or professional, and I subsidize that because it's got to be a cultural thing. And whether it's a conference, it's a micro-credential, or it's a book, I don't care, right? What I'm really looking for is for people to have the joy of learning. And I think it's so important if we're going to keep innovating and keep creating new things for this problem.
Now, I want to be conscious of time. We're just after 1 o'clock, and I have to leave time for Lorraine to wrap up, and she's got an exciting announcement. But Lorraine, do we have a couple more minutes for a few more questions? Okay. One of the questions that came in, a really specific industry, and anyone again jump in. What about the cannabis industry? Is this a growth area, or is it kind of peak cannabis and now in contraction?
Life sciences, as we call it. We don't call it cannabis anymore. It's life sciences. That makes it sound more, I don't know, less cannabis. And that is still a growth industry. I think what we're seeing, though, is some shifting to mergers and acquisitions, some consolidation in the industry. But no, it is still definitely seen. The biggest transactions that have been happening have been in this sector. So an absolute, still a growth industry for Alberta.
And I would only say that when you're seeing the blending of agriculture now and health and life science, so in the nutraceutical space and everything, this is where these convergences are occurring. So I would say to you that it is very much a growth industry. It may not just be in the same way that we thought it was originally going to grow when it started.
Lynette or Terry, anything on life sciences or?
Well, I mean, I think, what's interesting about it, I think it's kind of hard to predict, but I think I'll go back to Amy and the fact that 20 years ago or whenever Amy started, artificial intelligence wasn't a growth industry, but the big factors of, is this a thing worthy of being great at, were in place, and we managed to somehow stick it through. I think that the fundamentals around life sciences and whatever is going on in cannabis in terms of its growing, the broad specter of that area, what it can involve, there's kind of no scenario where that isn't a really important thing to be at the center of. So I feel like those are the kinds of things that, even though you don't have a quarterly return, there's a fundamental thing there that Alberta should continue to invest in. So it doesn't kind of matter what the growth means in the quarterly or annual sense, but in the sphere of decades, like, why wouldn't you want to be one of the best places in the world for life sciences?
Agreed. And I think your chat function, people are mentioning that investment by the feds in the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, which included funding research chairs in AI, created the opportunities that Amy has. So if that is a model, first of all, keep investing in that. And second of all, what are the other industries that we could be doing a similar thing in? It's a great point, Terry.
And I think just echo what everybody said about the real, one of the biggest untapped opportunities in cannabis is on the health side, the natural health products piece. But it's also, there are some regulatory barriers. So it's one of those things where, when government looks at a new industry, we really need to look at how do we enable that industry through regulation as opposed to how do we constrain. So looking at cannabis, I know that that's been a real struggle at the federal level in terms of some of the Health Canada regulations that prevented certain aspects of the economic diversification and development of that sector into some of those health products. So it's just one of those things where we need to be proactive in breaking down barriers, but we also need to be really agile and responsive to industry needs. Otherwise, we're going to get left behind, and other jurisdictions will pick this up, and we'll lose out on that first mover advantage.
Here's a question that came in from Joel. What is Alberta's biggest pushback from multinational or startups to be moving here? It maybe harkens back to some of our early conversation at the beginning of the session about maybe what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong. But do you see any pushback or any hurdles for multinationals moving here or startups? And that's a free-for-all question. Anyone jump in.
Yeah, so I would just comment that I think right now some of it is local market conditions. So it's the clustering of capacity in that particular sector that sometimes we're just not big enough. And some of that is the way we tell our story, but some of it is actually just simply we just don't have the growth. So when you think about a Toronto or Montreal, there are certain clusters, especially on the technology side, that are perceived by industry to be a better place to go and locate, or in health and in the biopharma space. But the reality is we do have a growing and emerging capability here. We just need to get that to a size where people see themselves being part of that ecosystem here.
The final question I've got before I turn it back over to each of you for a really brief 1 or 2 sentence wrap up. But and maybe Frank, you might have some thoughts. You might want to jump in on this. But a question that has come in: can you expand specifically on the Irish Western Canadian touch points? This has been a great discussion. I'd love to hear if there are any opportunities unique to the Irish market we should be focused on. Any of you have any thoughts on that? Maybe particularly Frank or Lorraine, for that matter. I don't want to put you guys on the spot. You didn't know you were going to be asked a question.
Yeah. Lorraine, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Just briefly, with CETA, it's taken away all of those tariffs that prevented it being an option really to trade with the EU. Ireland opens up the EU to businesses when it comes to going that way. Some key areas might be fintech, agritech, clean tech would be very key as well. And, Frank, you can add to that, of course, as well. Education is a key component, research. What else would you add to that, Frank?
Thanks, Lorraine. Yes, I totally agree with those sectors. I would also add the whole film and the creative media space, number one. Mining and exploration is huge. And, it's certainly there's an awful lot of Irish links, personal links in the mining and exploration side. That's another area for exploration. Timber, housing. Ireland has a housing need, a major housing need, and we need our own construction people back home as well. But we also have to do this in a sustainable way. So I would say the whole clean tech sector in general, I'd also add in there. And the energy side, of course, is vital these days. So I think we will be a natural partner. There is, just to mark the cards on the education side, Ireland's first senior education consultant is based in Victoria, and Sue Butler, she's working on BC at the moment, promoting linkages, but we will be looking to Alberta in the near future to help to build more educational and research linkages. There's a €1 billion research pot there for the next EU research program, and it's open to Canada and research agencies there to work together. So that would be another area I think that would be mutually beneficial. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Frank. Well, we're at 10 after 1, and we did promise we would be completely wrapped up by 1:15. So thank you everyone for all the questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but I'm going to return to the panelists, and we've got to be really quick on this. Each panelist, you get one word that you think should be front and center when we were thinking about positioning Alberta globally. One word, and then you can elaborate on that word a little bit, but keep it to 30 seconds if you can. Let's start with Lynette.
I'm going to cheat and use a hyphenated word, net zero.
Net zero.
So my elaboration would just be, I do agree that there's huge opportunity in agriculture, technology, all of these other aspects, but I really do think our real opportunity is positioning Alberta as a net zero clean energy provider for the world. And that's what I think we need to focus everything on at this point. And basically break down any barriers to being able to facilitate carbon capture and sequestration and producing the world's net zero, low carbon, clean energy for the future.
Terry, one word and a 30-second elaboration.
Well, I think the word I'm going to use is dynamic. I just think that we have amazing strengths, but the story of Alberta is that it kind of doesn't matter what you want to build. This is a place that's going to surround you with what you need to make it happen. And we're, more than other places, we're willing to entertain people who want to take a chance. I call Calgary the yes, let's city. So we'll say yes, and then we'll help you make it happen.
Malcolm, one word.
Bullish, and it's supported by two numbers. $18 billion of announced new investments in the region this year, and $2.7 billion worth of M&A transactions, both in and out from this region alone this year. So I'm very bullish.
And Joan, last word to you.
All mine. Collaboration. I think it's going to take industry, talent, government all together collaborating, and we absolutely have a bright future.
Net zero, dynamic, bullish collaboration. I think that's a wonderful forward sentiment to wrap up on. Thank you, panel. I'm going to turn it back over to Lorraine for concluding comments. Over to you, Lorraine.
Thank you so very much to all of our panelists and to you, Todd. There were also great comments and questions that I saw in the chat today from our guests, so thank you for engaging. You know, as Lynette said, we need to be catching Alberta's brand up to what Alberta is. And I think it was Malcolm who said we need to continue to build our reputation through improving internal regional dialogue that will positively affect our reputation internationally and build on that investment attraction. And then everybody touched on how critical it is to have key investments in infrastructure, talent, and programs that attract investment into the program. And if I emphasize anything, it would be that we really need to encourage Alberta companies to be looking outside of our borders when it comes to growing and being more aware of those opportunities and how they can benefit from them by expanding globally. With the leadership of this panel today, I know that Alberta will grow and companies will expand outside our borders, and we will continue to attract businesses here from around the world. Thank you all. In appreciation, we'll be making a donation on behalf of each of the panelists and our moderator to a nonprofit organization of your choice. And I'll loop back with you guys to get those details. So the announcement that we have today is that our organization, the Ireland Alberta Centre for Commerce Calgary, we've been around for 11 years now, and we've been focused on Calgary and Ireland. And we are now converting to serve Alberta and Ireland. We are excited to announce our new name and brand, which reflects our new focus. And the organization will, and you'll be the first to hear this, will now be known as the Ireland Alberta Trade Association. Through our broader reach, we'll be highlighting the sectoral expertise, strengths, and synergies between our two regions and connecting them to build a thriving economic corridor between Ireland and Alberta. Please watch for our official announcement. As I said, you're the first to hear, and that'll be coming out shortly. In addition, we're planning an in-person event for the beginning of February 2022 to tie in with the official launch of the Ireland Alberta Trade Association. Those details will follow, and we hope to welcome you all of you then. Once again, thank you to Consul General Flood, Calgary Economic Development, our wonderful panelists, Malcolm Bruce, Joan Hurts, Lynette Trombley, and Terry Rock, as well as our expert moderator, Todd Hirsch. My name is Lorraine Regan, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you.